Hello there, it's Marcus Kilvington here from Food Profits, founder of Food Profits, and welcome to this video. This afternoon I'm talking to Mark Roberts, who is the founder of EasyPreOrders in Nottingham and was a director of Go Dine, which is one of the UK's biggest and largest online booking services and restaurant guides. And what he's going to share with you and also me during the next 40 to 45 minutes is some wisdom about how you can actually improve margins and save your restaurant, pub or cafe on average between £6,000 and £8,000 a year, which he's going to share with you. So really warm welcome to you, Mark. Nice to have you here this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And you're just going to give us just a quick overview about EasyPreOrders?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, as Marcus says, started EasyPreOrders around about 2 to 3 years ago, I suppose. It came out of working with my brother at Go Dine, which is a restaurant guide all the way from Leeds down to Northampton. And basically everybody's moaning about pre-orders, organisers, customers cancelling reservations, restaurants having to, particularly at Christmas, just to do a huge amount of admin when it comes to chasing, collation of reports and spreadsheets and massive lever arch files. And we just decided this is crazy, put some technology to it. So we worked with a number of restaurants that we knew through Go Dine, and we've now got a nice bit of funky technology that saves venues a huge amount of admin, makes them more money, and makes organisers' lives a lot easier. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fabulous. So what we're going to do sort of the next 40-45 minutes, we're going to talk about typical issues that would face a pub or a restaurant or a cafe, the same sort of thing really. Talk a bit about marketing, look at some trends, look at the technology and how that can actually help them, and then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about operations, and then we'll just wrap it up and summarise at the end, and I will give you Mark's details if anybody wants to talk to Mark after we finish this. So first thing I think we want to start with, we're going to talk about typical issues that face in restaurants.
I mean, I've kind of mentioned it before. I mean, this is in terms of EasyPreOrders and what we do in terms of problems with taking reservations and creating reports, and in terms of what you can save customers and also for the venue. But in terms of typical issues, I mean, as Marcus rightly says, I mean, I've come from a bit of a restaurant background. I used to be worked in kitchens. I'm not proclaiming to be the best chef ever, but obviously we've got a lot of contacts within the restaurant industry, and there's a lot of things that we see across the industry, just silly little practices and little things that we've picked up that we believe is fairly valuable. So we've really class various, whether it's restaurants or pubs. We typically class restaurants into three categories, whether they're metropolitan restaurants, which we typically see are city-centric. Particularly what we find with restaurants is their location and their positioning and their menu offering to customers. So when a customer walks up to your venue, it's always got to look pristine. It's always got to, the signage has got to be absolutely perfect. But particularly the menus and what's going on with the economy at the moment, really, is that people want to know what they're spending. So what you tend to find is when restaurants have menus that are outside their front door with very small price tags, supplements here, there and everywhere, full a la carte menus, it can be very, very difficult and very too easy for a customer to look at the menu and say, do you know what, that's out of my price point, even though there could be cheaper dishes on that menu. And where you position certain dishes down to how favourable they are, how cheap they are, you really need to make that decision easy for that person that's looking at your menus to really understand what you're about and how much they're going to pay. In terms of destination restaurants, obviously footfall is going to be difficult. You really need to be starting to gauge a really good reputation for fantastic food. Ultimately, if someone's going to drive half an hour out to your restaurant and then half an hour back, they have to have a fantastic experience. But what we tend to find is that those same venues will struggle at lunch, and they will struggle Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. So what we've seen from a lot of restaurants, particularly out towards Leicestershire, out in the sticks, your Hearts that's also run by Hamilton Hall and Stapleford Park, they will have a different offering throughout lunchtimes, throughout off-peak periods that really does entice customers in. But offers have to be very carefully generated. You do not want the perception that a customer is getting a great deal on a Monday and therefore will not go back on a Friday and spend almost twice as much. And generally with hotel restaurants, differentiation of the restaurant away from the hotel can be very, very difficult. What it always seems to be just an addition to the rooms and how much money they're making out of the rooms. But the restaurants really need to differentiate themselves away from the hotel, away from the brand, be a completely separate brand, a completely separate trading entity almost, even with separate websites and things like that. So it's just a few typical issues that we see, nothing too in deep, but just a few generic things. And we can discuss further.
Brilliant, that's really great. So there's some really interesting stuff going on there. So what you're kind of saying is if you're a restaurant in a hotel, you actually need to brand yourself a little bit differently. So can people actually make the restaurant that they actually want to go to rather than thinking that we only going to eat the restaurant if I'm actually staying in the hotel?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, a hotel restaurant should be a completely different subset away from the main operation, have even a separate website that doesn't even mention the fact that they're in a hotel. I just think that people look at hotel restaurants and see, well, that's only for the people that are staying at that hotel.
Yeah, that's...
which is a problem for the hotels to get away from that. But there has been obviously success stories with, say, like Ramsay's at Claridge's and places like this where you've got the differentiation there, and people will go into the restaurant rather than just thinking, let's stay in the hotel as well. Yeah,
how true that is, Right, some really, really good stuff there, Mark. So we're going to talk a little bit about marketing now, a little bit. Which is excellent. Lots to talk about on this one, but I know you've got some great knowledge on this, and your views and opinions on this are really valuable.
Yeah, marketing is a difficult one, a really difficult one. It can be really quite expensive for restaurants to get their, whether they're pubs, restaurants, cafes, to get their brand out there and awareness of what they do, what they sell, how much things are. And I can imagine, because we do make a fair few phone calls, that restaurants get absolutely hounded and bombarded by everybody that's got the best magazine, the most prominent and most copy out here and there. But for us, and obviously we do too, we get a lot of information, a lot of phone calls, people asking us to put adverts in. We'll just step through a few things that we've kind of learnt, I suppose, and how we look at things, which I must confess is quite numbers orientated, and if I pay X, do I get Y out of it? But magazines, for me, is something you have to be careful with. I'm aware of a few publications out there that have a huge amount of copy. They also have a huge amount of pages, and when I flick through magazines, I don't look at adverts, I look at the content of the magazine. So magazine advertising has to be thought of very carefully. Traditionally what happens is you'll put an advert in a magazine, and then that magazine gets distributed to all the people that have bought magazine advertising space. So you look at the magazine thinking, oh, everybody can see this, but actually it's just you and anybody else that's bought a magazine. What we tend to find with magazines is if we partner with a magazine to offer some kind of better quality articles, whether it be the print, away from this is an advert. So we have worked with in the past magazine companies, and we will say offer a recipe into that magazine that's a value add to their readers, but is also not particularly an advert. So we tend to find that works well. But magazine print can be very difficult. And the question I've always put at the bottom is, what are your returns? And the problem is with magazines, you just do not know.
That's a great question. And I see so many pubs and restaurants, you've only got to pick up, I mean, you and I were doing this in Nottingham this afternoon. You've only got to pick up like Nottingham Topic, Derbyshire Life, Derbyshire Magazine, and in the end you've got full pages. And I won't mention any restaurants, but full pages, and you and I know that's probably cost anywhere between £400–500 for a full page in a month.
And the rest.
And you're absolutely right. What can you measure it? Is it the best use of your money? The truth is it's not, is it?
No. Well, it can be, and arguably you can argue yes, you can argue no, but ultimately who knows? And that's the point. Nobody knows. So unless you're actually measuring every person that comes into your restaurant and saying, how did you hear about us? And they say, this magazine was the only reason I made this booking, then absolutely go for it. But what you'll tend to find that magazines really form part of your marketing initiatives and should be there to really back up your brand. Don't expect people to walk into your restaurant just on the basis that you're saying how great your restaurant is in a magazine.
Totally agree with you.
But obviously online is a huge part of any kind of marketing plan. So you can use things like Google AdWords. Google AdWords is an expensive thing to do, particularly if you want to pick up generic AdWord campaigns such as, I don't know, British restaurants in Nottingham or the best restaurant in Nottingham. You'll pay a lot for generic AdWords, some in excess of £3–4 per click. So obviously if you're trading at £20 average spend, you would need a huge amount of people to actually make a reservation.
Yep.
So just be very, very careful with AdWords, and you can get sucked into it, and then you can start upping your bids and how much people spend. But for me, online marketing is a difficult thing. It's expensive, particularly if you don't know what you're doing. But for me, you might want to have a look at remarketing, which is a cheaper way of getting banner adverts onto various different websites with your brand. So not necessarily people won't click it, but they'll see your brand there and can just, again, form part of a bigger marketing campaign. But generally, your site must be really nicely structured, so at the very least you are top for your own search term. But just be careful of some companies that will advertise you and then put their adverts above your website.
Right, that's interesting.
So just be careful of that. PR is something that's really quite, people love a bit of PR, they love getting in news, they love getting a bit of press, and I think with restaurants it is a very good thing to do. So it touches on the magazines, giving recipes to, say, your local newspaper on a monthly basis, but PR is very expensive. You have to look at PR, you have to look at the strategy of thinking, I need to spend at least £2,000 a month for 12 months.
Yeah.
PR returns will not kick in until 3, 4, 6 months.
So there's a lot of investment there, isn't it?
A lot of investment. It's something you have to go with, and there's a lot of investment in social media, even if it's free.
Yeah, go on, tell us, talk to us about that, because that's really quite interesting about what you're talking about, social media.
It's faddy, it's buzzy. People think you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you know, and people really care about, you know, you tweeting and Facebooking or whatever you do. It's a massive undertaking, social media. It is not to be underestimated. Building up a Twitter base from scratch is intensely difficult. It gets easier over time, but if you want to get a following of 2, 4, 6, 800 people, you're probably looking at the same amount of hours per follower that you're going to have to follow up over time.
Right.
So Facebook is a difficult thing, and is turning very much more money orientated, where you have to pay for your ads to appear in people's news feeds. I ignore them, and I can imagine everybody else does. But again, it's brand awareness, and you pay for the click, you don't pay for the view. So even if you make an unattractive advert that gets your brand out there and no one clicks it, they've read your name, which again, forming part of a bigger marketing strategy with online remarketing and magazines, can be a good thing to do.
Okay.
But social media is not to be underestimated in terms of how much work it will take you to get 300-400 followers. And then even if you tweet, that tweet will only last a couple of seconds and be in that feed for a couple of seconds. And people think I should be saying, oh, how great my restaurant is in every tweet.
Brilliant. So can I ask you a quick question then? So if you're running a pub, you're running a cafe, restaurant, you might not have you might just have one, you might just have one or two, and kind of what you've just said now is it might have opened 1 or 2 people's eyes into, actually, goodness me, should I be doing it then, or how should I do it? What's the best use of my time and resource then with the whole social media thing? Because I think what can often happen, I think this has happened, is people just get swept along with it. They think, well, if I'm not doing that, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. But what you're kind of saying here is actually it's about focus, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, it's focusing on what is best for you. So for me, social media, unless you have quite a large marketing budget to put towards the management of a Facebook and a Twitter profile, you either go all in or you just don't bother. I think you should have a page, and that would be for people doing research, things like that. But unless you can respond to people immediately, unless you have structured advertising and tweets and Facebook feeds, and what I'm talking about is having an approach every week where you're putting a recipe out, you're putting a review out, you're talking about 300 to 500 words, which in itself you can pay a writer to do for between £10 and £20 per article. But it has to be engaging and it has to be interesting. You just can't bombard people with your brand and saying, we are the best, we do this. People are just not interested. It needs to be value-added stuff, which is where the difficulty lies. Because if you're giving value-added stuff, it has to be thought out, and it has to be, therefore, time-consuming. And obviously time is money, and could be better spent in understanding your operation better, and maybe walking around from house to house and handing out flyers.
Right, some great, valuable, useful tips there from you, Mark. Thank you so much for that. You also want to touch on TripAdvisor?
TripAdvisor, yeah, is a tool that some people moan about. Some people cheat it, as we all know. They will put reviews on about their own restaurant, saying how great they are and how family friendly my restaurant is, and also very good for couples too. Those kind of reviews are obviously bogus.
Yeah.
But for me, you're always going to get complaints. TripAdvisor is a wash with people just having a moan, because like the good British public, nobody wants to actually moan to you, to your face. They'll do it when they walk out your restaurant. It's not the way and how many complaints you get, it's how you deal with those. So you, as a TripAdvisor user, if you see complaints on there, I would fully expect there to be complaints however good you are, but it's how you deal with those, how you respond to those, how you engage with the customer and basically rectify the situation is the most important thing. So if someone's had an issue, what have you done, who's accountable for it, and how are you recompensing the customer and making sure that they come back. You're always going to get moany people, but you just need to respond to those people in a good fashion, and don't just outburst rage attack, even though if they're completely wrong.
Fabulous.
But you must always get back to people that have a moan through TripAdvisor.
Thanks, Mark. Bit on offers and identity, that's a really crucial one, isn't it?
Yeah, offers, as we know, I can imagine there's many restaurants and pubs and cafes that have been bombarded by vouchers and things like this. Yes, fine, off-peak trade on your own terms, Monday through Wednesday. Lunch only includes an extra glass of wine potentially. Do not underestimate the power and the problems that you will derive if you are giving away huge percentages away to customers, because those customers will not come back and spend twice as much to have the same meal that they had at half the price.
Yeah.
It is very damaging for brand, and there are well-known brands out there that are still on the high street but have struggled because they wanted to increase revenue, and by doing that they would give away 50%, which got a 60% upturn in trade. However, when those vouchers suddenly go away, those people will not come back. So offers have to be done in a very strategic kind of way. The customer will take an offer up, but my advice would be is make that customer work to get that offer. Make sure that the customer understands this is a one-time offer and they are lucky to have it, but next time they come back they'll be expected to pay full price.
Okay, that's quite
50%
interesting.
off and things like this is very damaging to your brand, and people will not come back and pay full price regardless of what people tell you.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for sharing that with everybody. Identity?
Yeah, you've just got to know who you are and what you're about.
I think this is crucial, isn't it? You're going to touch on this a little bit later, because I think a lot of people that I come across actually have got no, and I mean this in the most respectful way, got no idea.
Yeah, and the problem can become when you are trying to be everything to everybody, and simply you just cannot do that. When you open a restaurant or bar or cafe, you've got to understand your audience, who you're marketing to, who are your ideal candidates for coming in and spending money with you.
That's crucial, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And then you see that if I just served just a bit more French cuisine, then I might get another 10 people through my front door. But then people also love Italian cuisine as well, so why don't I just slap a couple of Italian dishes on there? It's not. It can be good to try and do everything, but bear in mind the more that you sell, the more waste you're going to have, and ultimately it's down to what are your core skills? What are you about? If you have opened up a burger shack, keep selling burgers and people come back for burgers. Don't start going into Italian cuisine and everything like that. You've really got to stick to what you know and who you are, and really just move and change with the times based on customer feedback rather than your perception of what customers want, which, yes, is everything, but ultimately people don't go to restaurants because they can have everything. People go to restaurants because they want to go for that one thing that you do. Great points.
Great points. And returns, that's always important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just relating all the above to what are your returns. So when you look at magazines, you know, if I spend £1,000 on a magazine advert, realistically I'm going to need £4,000 of trade to get that back. Am I measuring it? Is it getting me that revenue back? Am I making my money back? What are your returns? That's the thing. If you don't know, then don't do it. That's a good thing with online. That's a good thing with some of the social media. You can measure it. You can understand how many visitors you've had. You can understand how many people have booked.
Yeah.
So I can see that, the way I see it sometimes is a sausage machine. What do you have to put in for something to come out at the other end.
Great
if I
philosophy.
spend £100 on online marketing, on AdWords, I get 50 customers looking at my website, and I know that 1 in 5 people make a booking for 3 people.
Yeah.
Therefore, that equals £60.
Yeah.
So you really should be thinking in terms of what I put in at one end, what comes out at the other. And there's some ambiguity, as I said, around some marketing channels.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Fabulous. So while you're listening to this video, hopefully making a few notes of what Mark's sort of telling you here, and I think that's absolutely vital what he's just talked about, and that is, can you measure it? Are you measuring it? And what are your returns? Because if you don't do that, you're kind of wasting money. And if there's only one thing you take away from this sort of 45 minutes on this video, then that is it. So play the last 3 or 4 minutes again and listen to those golden words of Mark's. We're just going to move on and talk a little bit about trends, aren't we now? Just to give some facts and figures on some stuff.
Yeah, I think they're fairly fortunate being at the cutting end in terms of understanding customer trends and who's booked what. As I say, my brother's business is called Go They promote in the order of 600 restaurants now. They have a huge amount of people going to the website, and a huge amount of people making bookings. And of course, like any good business, they measure, they understand how many visitors equals how many bookings equals how much business they're generating for their customers. The way that company works is based on return. So basically, you cannot spend money unless you're getting custom out of it. So that kind of marketing is sensible and makes sense. And if you're opening up a restaurant, you kind of might as well do it, because ultimately, £100 spend generates 50 customers. But some of the things that they have shared with us really is that, unfortunately, there are an increasing trend on people looking for better offers,
Okay.
not necessarily wanting to spend full amounts of money on menus. But what is full amounts of money? It can be anything. I mean, if you're able to package up a nice low-cost early bird menu or pre-theatre menu, that seems to be very, very popular at the moment. People going out for a quick meal after dinner and then popping out for a couple of drinks afterwards. So around about 35% of the online bookings have offers attached to that booking, and that can be anything. That can be from just a free drink to anything, but it's the perception that the customer's getting value, which they're not necessarily getting, but a restaurant can be just giving £5 off, which ultimately I would be then asking my waitresses to then go around perhaps a second time to ask them if they would like another drink to recoup my £5.
Yeah.
But one of the things that is really becoming quite key is that 65% of people research the internet before they make a reservation at your restaurant.
That's a big number, isn't it?
It's a huge number, and that's because of the availability of the internet and information literally within 3 clicks on your mobile phone, your tablet, whatever it might be. And ultimately, people love looking at food, they love looking at restaurants, so I can understand why that's so high.
Yeah.
So that really comes back to some of the marketing things. Are you top for your search term, my restaurant in Nottingham? Am I top? Have I responded to my TripAdvisor complaints? Is my Facebook wall, is it there? Not necessarily updated constantly, but does it just show that someone's in and at home?
Yeah.
And does my website represent what I do? And are there the call to actions and the simple call to actions?
And what would a simple call to action be? Because again, in my experience, I know we talked about this earlier, but a lot of sort of pub restaurants, cafes, websites are, I know this isn't knocking it, but there's no call to action.
No. The easiest thing is put your phone number at the top of the screen.
Yep.
I can't understand why you'd want it on a contact page. I mean, it's really quite simple. Phone number at the top, email at the top, book here or inquire here at the top. It needs to be the first thing. We do a lot of work through technology such as Crazy Egg, which might be worth having a look at, but basically heat maps and shows you anything that a visitor's doing on your website, whether they're scrolling, clicking, anything. And all you need to know is that a call to action is for somebody for you to capture their details or for them to get in touch with you. That needs to be at the very top and on every single page, because there is nothing worse than having to delve in 3 clicks into a website to find just the telephone number.
Yeah, great words of wisdom, that.
It's simple stuff.
Yeah.
It's simple stuff, but a lot of people just don't do it.
Thank you so much, Mark. That's really great. And you can save a lot of money, can't you, on wastage by getting all this sort of stuff right?
Yeah, it's, I mean, generally wastage, you look at big hospitality and a few other kind of industry emails that come through. And one of the biggest things is, yeah, you look in, wastage is increasing and has increased, in some cases getting out of hand. And that's because of the off-peak, on-peak problems. That's the preparation time that you have within restaurants. And that, you know, you might be skewed very heavily to Friday, Saturday night trade, and therefore cooking and wasting food Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and again, it comes back to sorting out your offers off-peak. Maybe there's a different proposition to your on-peak trade that really has maybe a reduced menu to try and bring down that wastage.
Yeah.
Because I think wastage, and there will be drives in future to reduce restaurant wastage. Yeah.
£10,000 that'll pay for a lovely holiday, wouldn't it, to the Seychelles for our owner and partner, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, or a bit of part-time staff, so you don't have to work there all the time.
Absolutely,
So,
bit more free time with your loved
about.
ones and family. Thanks, Mark. That's really good. So we're going to talk a little bit about technology now, aren't we?
Yeah. Technology is obviously growing. I work in technology. I've been involved with technology businesses and how that translates over to restaurants as well. One of the scariest things is, and something that is still growing and will continue to grow in excess of 40%, is the fact that 34% of internet usage is on the mobile phone. That makes things very difficult if you built your site 5, 6, 7 years ago. But it will increase, and particularly what people want from a mobile device is basic headline information. So things like your phone number and email is what people will be looking for on a mobile device. Are you open? When are you open? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So we use obviously a lot of clever technology, but one of the buzzwords is really responsive web design. Basically, it just turns around to your device, any kind of device, and says, how big are you? And then renders the web page based on that device. So it really can be quite simple. You can employ any kind of contractors, but if you just basically put responsive web design to that contractor, they will make it so you can be viewable in your mobile device.
Okay.
But it's absolutely key. Definitely, you cannot have nowadays a desktop website rendering in mobile. People just will not look at it.
Right, so anybody listening to this that you might have had your website up for a year or two needs to go and check it out with the website person to make sure it's actually responsive now that more and more people can use their mobile phones.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, I've banged on about it many a time, but I mean, please do. It's all about making it visible, clear menu pricing. So you can get huge menus with various different pricing, but what we've noticed, and also through some of the reports through Go Dine, is not necessarily people are not tighter than they were. What people want to know is how much are they spending? What do I have to budget for Friday night to go out for dinner?
Yeah.
If you've got a massive a la carte menu where you have to pay for your sides, you have to pay for the mashed potato, you have to pay for the blue cheese sauce that comes with your ribeye steak, I'm looking at your menu thinking this could get out of hand if I'm not very careful.
Right.
Clear menu pricing is something that we touched on earlier, but for me, there are examples, fantastic examples, and they won't mind me mentioning, such as Creme in Stapleford.
I was in there the other day.
Yeah, very nice place. But where they have picked up a huge amount of business is by offering a set menu, X amount for 2 courses, Y amount for 3 courses. People look at that menu, and yes, it is more expensive than a cheap city centre restaurant offering a buffet. But what they're good at is just letting the customer know that you will spend no more than £20 or £25 or £30, whatever it is.
Yep.
But the customer can budget for that.
Yep.
Whereas if they look at another a la carte menu, where if you tot up the a la carte menu, it's the same price.
Yep.
But first of all, I've had to then do the mental arithmetic around how much it's costing me, and what happens if I fancy the steak that's costing me, 15, 18, £20, and then I want the chips, and then I want the peas, and then I want the sauce. Keep it simple for customers. Make sure that they can budget very quickly just by a snapshot of looking at your menu.
That's the key, isn't it? Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it was about a year ago now. I met Jason Atherton from Pond Street Social down in London, and very brief chat with him. And even his lunchtime menu for like a Michelin star restaurant was he had to be under £30. Right. So people knew, might say, well, £30 is a lot for lunch, but okay, in his restaurant you might argue that it's not. But again, just to keep it simple and do exactly what you've just talked about.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I can imagine he's also promoting it as his lunchtime menu. So it differentiates that away from his Friday night or Saturday night trade.
Yeah.
But then letting the customer know exactly what it's going to cost, rather than the ambiguity around say a la carte pricing.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic example of what we've been talking about, definitely.
Brilliant. Now you're just going to share with everybody just a little thing that you do, which is savings in numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on some of the other kind of technology systems that you can get hold of. I mean, you've got reservation systems, and there are some that are better than others. My advice would be to look at the new age web-based reservation systems that tend to be cheaper, as opposed to the legacy companies that have been operating for years and years and years, that have built technology on technology on technology.
Any suggestions?
It's difficult for me to say.
Okay, don't put anybody on the spot.
We won't put any names forward,
okay.
But I would just look at web-based reservation systems. That's probably your best bet. You can get labour systems that understand trade, but for my guess, I would keep it simple. It depends upon your experience, but there are systems out there where you can determine whether you're understaffed, overstaffed, and how much you're spending on staff, which can be a difficult thing to measure and understand. And there are labour systems out there that are pretty decent. But there's always noise, particularly in the moment, about apps. Pros and cons.
What's your view then on apps?
Honestly?
Yeah, be honest.
We haven't done apps, but I can understand why a company that has a listing would offer apps. And the reason I say that is that, say, if I want to make an order at a sandwich shop, I look at their website. They say to make a sandwich order, please download our application. So what have I got to do? I've got to go to Google Play or one of the other app stores, purchase the app or download the app, which if I'm not connected to Wi-Fi, I'm just not going to do there and then. Basically what I'm saying is it creates stumbling blocks, and if I then want to go and buy a sandwich because I fancy something slightly different from another shop, does that mean that I'm then going to start downloading an app for every single restaurant or cafe or pub that I want to order food at? For me, that's not the way. It is cool to have an app, but you will not find, unless you promote it, that people will download it. Don't put an app in the way of people making an order. Go back to something like responsive web design, which is kind of technology that we employ, which just allows you to render pages in web. Apps, for me, their popularity over time will decrease as a result of the speed of mobile phones. Apps are primarily there to speed up web traffic and speed up the downloading of data. With the emergence of 4G, where you're getting 30 meg download speeds, I don't think you'll need apps in the future, personally. I think they're cool, but faddy, and for me a barrier. Okay,
that's fascinating for me, because I think one of the things that, certainly in my experience, that we probably, my experience now tells me the industry we work in, actually, the majority of people that run a restaurant or a pub or a cafe, we assume that they are quite savvy technology, and not being disrespectful to absolutely nobody, most of them actually aren't, are they? Most of them aren't. I quite agree with you about the point about an app. A lot of people just still don't get what an app is and kind of like shy away from it almost.
Yeah.
So kind of like, if you're kind of thinking, well, good to me, I don't know a lot about technology, what would you suggest? Kind of, again, back to your phrase, keep it simple and make sure that you kind of got people the easiest.
I think if you're a restaurateur, stick to being a restaurateur. If you are particularly good at making cakes, stick to making cakes. Don't go into apps and technology. Employ other people that are, and do it on recommendation. Speak to other people where you've seen a good example, and get the technology people to do the technology. You will have people within your operation that are more tech savvy than yourself, per se, that could be delegated to look after these things. But the whole idea with restaurant technology is that once it's set up, which is that company's usually their obligation to set it up for you, that then it just rolls on. Technology, unfortunately, whatever way you look at it, is going to play a bigger part in society and what we do and makes our choices.
Yeah.
So you have to get involved. But making the right decisions is a difficult thing. So my advice would be to look at somebody else that you admire in terms of that area and copy them's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Maybe emulate some of their success.
I know what you mean, kind of like, yeah, copy, model them. Just look at what they got. So if you're listening to this, you're a pub, and we talk about this all the time at Food Profits, is go and find somebody. There must be somebody you know that's doing really, really well as a pub, and go and look at what they do and go and even talk to them. Same with if you're in a restaurant, same with if you're in a cafe. Go and find somebody who you know, or if you don't know anybody that's doing incredibly well, go and do some research and go and find them, go and look at them, because it will be one of the best uses of your time spent.
Definitely, and people love talking about their businesses. Ask people questions about their business and what they do and how they do it. People will tell you as much, probably more than you wanted to know, but people love talking about themselves generally, I suppose,
Yeah,
and also technology, and also what they do and where they're successful.
Yeah.
You ask, you will get that information, no worries.
Brilliant advice, Mark.
But a lot of this, it all comes down to what will be my return. So you've just got to understand that if I'm investing into a reservation system, and I spend £1,000, how much money am I getting that out at the other end?
Yeah.
Same with labour systems. You can employ labour systems. Just make sure that there's some kind of ROI or return on investment caveat within that contract, because you don't want to be spending thousands of pounds on these systems and then finding that you're spending X thousands of pounds maintaining them.
Yeah, that's really useful to know. Now, I was talking a little bit earlier on. I stole your thunder a little bit, but you're just going to show us a few numbers, aren't you, just to make that a little bit bigger?
Well, yeah, I mean, what it's about, again, it's just going back on return on investment. So, I mean, this is what we do, really. We have a pre-ordering system that saves customers a huge amount of time, increases trade. So how much? I mean, we've done a huge amount of work around this with partnered with people and getting testimonials. So any system that you employ should have the same kind of thought process behind it. But essentially, EasyPreOrders, for instance, would save a huge amount of Christmas labour. You don't have to create any reports anymore. You don't have to create spreadsheets. You don't have to create table cards, anything like that. It will then have annual staffing cost savings as you go through. So it's not necessarily about saving, employing a member of staff, it's utilising that staff in a better way. So could that person, rather than pushing paper on the lever arch file and spreadsheet that you're insisting everyone fills out, should they not just be using the system and selling more?
Yeah,
so
I
just
agree.
redeploying your existing resource into something better. Again, it saves 5 to 8% in terms of recooking dishes, stops people from forgetting what they've ordered, makes the whole service a lot slicker with instant table cards, so the organiser doesn't stand at the end of the table. You know, you've been to a restaurant, Marcus, and you've got people saying who's got the chicken, who's got the beef. None of that anymore. So you can actually turn tables quicker, more efficiently. But one thing that we're concentrating on at the moment is lunch and pre-theatre. So we allow the ability for diners to pre-order and prepay for a meal. So you have no-shows, but you can speed up service, that 15 minutes at the beginning of service and the 15 minutes after when you've asked for the bill.
Right.
So you can start bringing in more business people, particularly who work in local offices or teams,
Yeah.
and just really get a better customer experience out of it by saving them massive amounts of time. Now, just these examples exactly how you should be thinking about employing a reservation system or a labour saving system, where you need to understand the returns. If you don't understand the returns, then it's not worth the investment, because you could just be paying something that's doing nothing.
Yeah, so again, it's about measuring.
Yeah, and yeah, like any decent bit of kit, we offer return on investment, and if you don't get that return on investment, you get your money back. We've had no requests for that so far.
Brilliant, Mark. That's really good. So can I just, before you move off that one, can I just ask you a couple of things? So an average user, you've got a few figures on there.
Yeah.
So when you say saves and makes, I'm presuming, well, I'm going to let you explain. Saves, makes, invests. Invests obviously is what it would probably cost for some sort of system per year, is that?
Yes, per annum, yeah, based on usage. So if you want the system to look like you built it, so it's got your brand, it's got your navigation, it's got your background colours, then you're going to be looking at towards the top end of the 900 quid. But basically, the savings are a result of reduced wastage and people saying, I've forgotten what I've ordered.
Okay, right.
In terms of if you're getting a higher percentage of people to pre-order, you're not actually cooking extra dishes that you don't need.
Yeah.
The kitchen's not cooking dishes that they're never going to actually give out from the kitchen pass.
Yeah.
And a huge amount of labour in terms of you don't have to chase anybody anymore. You don't have to turn the spreadsheet that a customer sent over into a kitchen report, into kitchen checks, into total night reports. How many dishes do I need on Black Friday in December? Everything is done automatically for you. So there's direct savings as a result.
Okay.
But the makes is quite juicy, really. We've had customers that have returned threefold in 2 weeks the whole annual cost of Easy Pre-Orders, and that's literally because that customer was able to upload and invite all of their guests automatically.
Yeah.
Rather than attaching a spreadsheet to an email, sending them out to all their guests then not coming back to them, chasing them, who's the money, caked in on your desk, 10 quid in, 10 quid in, drive to the restaurant. It just makes the customer service a lot better, slicker. You will get somewhere in the order of 20 to 80 extra guests per month as a result of employing a system like this.
That's really good, because one of the things, again, a lot of restaurants will struggle to actually get people in lunch times, and often they get, particularly city centre restaurants, often because, you'll know this, it's because the person that might be in the office and wants to go out to the pub or the restaurant is very conscious of the fact they might only have an hour, absolute maximum. So if they employed a system whereby they knew they were going to be in and out in an hour, that would be really, really good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because people, particularly now, are not constrained by money, it's usually constrained by time, particularly when you were looking at metropolitan areas and city areas. But yeah, you've only got 45 minutes at lunch, that you only have 45 minutes before you've got to go to the theatre.
Yeah.
If you can say, I want this and I want that, and I'm turning up at 5, and I turn up at 5, and at 2 minutes past 5, there's my starter.
Yeah.
I then have my main course, and I don't even have to pay my bill.
Yeah.
I'm saving a huge amount of time, and as a restaurant, and I'm opening up new markets and making more money.
Brilliant. I'm also going to presume then, correctly, although I'm saying it myself, is the fact that if you're going to do that and you're actually going to promote that, you have some sort of system whereby you actually can do that at lunchtime. You will always have that benefit statement somewhere on front of your website, mustn't you, to make people aware of it?
Definitely, yeah. It's anything, that's the kind of thing that I would want to be putting on Facebook, on Twitter, value-added stuff. So did you know that it only takes half an hour to have lunch at my restaurant, and I guarantee it, and if not, I'll give you a free drink next time.
What a cracking idea.
I mean, it's simple stuff like that.
Cracking idea. How often do you see it, though? I don't even remember seeing it.
I mean, you see sandwich boards saying, oh yeah, quick lunch, but if I've got a team of 8 people that I'm taking out as an office do, we're not going to be in and out in an hour. It's just not going to happen. But the feeling that this system gives is that I've paid it, I've ordered it, so I can see where I've got my time savings. It just makes it more attractive and more appealing to a customer.
Superb. So if you need to make sure that it's actually on your website. It's put down, any benefit statements are actually on your website, so that you can get more customers in the door and they kind of know what they're doing. We're just going to talk a little bit about operations, aren't we?
Yeah, just generally.
Just a few things about that and how this kind of works in the industry that we're in.
Just generally. The 20 minutes before service to understand that the waiter, waitress knows what you're selling and how, and the origin of food, and really understanding what the kitchen needs, how the kitchen operates, who the chef is, where the chefs come from. These are all soft skills that there's no excuse why these people can't understand, the origin of where a steak's come from, or particularly what wine goes with a certain steak. Just little bits of information that literally takes 3-5 minutes per item, or half an hour before service, really puts across to the customer that waiter or waitress is not just there as a part-time job at university, that they actually care and they actually know about what they're selling. Ultimately, you wouldn't go and buy a car off a person that's never driven a car and understands what makes this car better than another car.
How true.
So it needs to be, knowledge really is valuable, and particularly something that people in the US understand. The US is very much service based, and you are expected to pay 20% tip to staff. Yes, you pay cheaper food, so it kind of works itself out. But what you'll find in the US particularly is that the staff know more, they're more engaging, they care more, they understand more about their business and the place of work that they're in. So as any staff training, contractually even, when you bring on staff, they need to understand that they're going to have to take the menu away when they finish to understand what's on that menu. Because there's nothing worse than asking, what is this or what's that menu, and that waiter, waitress knows nothing.
That's a good point. So if you're listening to this and you don't do that with your staff, please make sure that you now do. Good point, Mark.
And then we mentioned about TripAdvisor earlier, complaints handling. Every company needs a complaints handling process. Who deals with it? Who is responsible for it? And ultimately, it comes down to the owner or the director of the business.
Yep.
But there needs to be a complaints procedure. So, who do I refer a simple complaint to, such as my steak has been overcooked slightly, or how do I deal with a phone call with a customer ranting the fact that they have food poisoning as a result of being to your establishment? Probably might be false, you'd hope, but there needs to be a complaints handling process. Who deals with it and when? That's the most important thing. You'll always get complaints, but it's how you handle those complaints, definitely.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm sure you know as well as I do that actually if you handle a complaint really, really well, you're more likely to get a more loyal customer than actually if you didn't handle it well. They're more likely to come back even though they've had a complaint in the first place.
Yeah, I'll be amazed if nobody gets a complaint. When I worked in the kitchen, I had 4, but I still remember them to this day. I think it was about 8-10 years ago now.
Yeah.
But for me at the time, it was quite a severe apology. And then an extra drink on the house,
yep.
And then offering them something else off the menu, which at the time sufficed, and they enjoyed it, and I made sure when I cooked that dish it was a good one, or one of my better ones.
Good man.
And that person does come back and will come back, but if you turn around and say, do you know what, you're wrong customer, I'm a chef, I know everything, that's just not going to wash, and that's when you get the bad complaints on TripAdvisor. That's when you get the bad feeling of a customer. That if you don't listen to your customers, you don't deal with it, then that's when you lose customers.
Yeah, how true that is. And if you're listening and you're an owner manager to this afternoon, and please make sure, as Mark just mentioned, you've got a policy in place, but you also kind of, like I often talk about, go the extra mile to put it right, like you've just talked about, cook the dish for it, give them a free drink, whatever it might be, but acknowledge it and absolutely don't complain. Because if you don't do that, you really are shooting yourself in the foot. Quick little story for you. I've got a little time for this, but I was out it's about 4 weeks ago, and I went to North Wales.
Yeah.
And I went with my mum and dad just for a few days away. I went to this place that I checked it out on the website you were talking about earlier. I looked at the website. They've won loads of awards. They knocked this pub down and rebuilt it in 2007. Great menu, great setting. It's about 300 yards from the beach. There's nowhere else around it. Yes, they've got like a captive audience. Great food. And I went in. In fact, we went in a couple of days, but went in. The staff were as miserable as hell. Right, they were dreadful. And I got talking to this lady behind the bar, and it turned out that she was running the pub. And she was miserable, really miserable. She was moaning about the fact that the normal managers weren't there and all the rest of it. She was as miserable as sin. And then I ordered some food, and the guy behind the bar is one of those kind of guys that you order your food and he goes £15.50.
Yeah.
And I went, what, £15.50 what? And he went, £15.50. And I went, £15.50 please. Yeah, that's right. And he didn't even say thank you. And I couldn't believe it. But here's the thing for you. Quick story for you. I wrote a letter of complaint to the owner of this place, to the owner. And it's great what you just talked about complaint handling, because the owner, I won't mention where it is, but he's on the island of Holy Island, north of Anglesey, so you've got an idea where it might be anyway. He wrote back to me and he said something like this. He said, thank you for your letter, Marcus. I think I know who the staff were. I've had a bit of a chat to them, and I hope when you come back next time everything will be all right for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was it. That was it. That was it. Well, I'm like, this is the owner that's obviously spent a fortune knocking it down, and he's got a great place, great menu, but staff let him down. But the owner was like, hope it'll be all right next time. No, we're really sorry.
Yeah.
It's bad attitude. Please come back again, and when you come back, make sure that you have a point to see me, because I want to make sure you're looked after the next time.
Yeah.
So the question, of course, is, Mark, will I go back there?
Probably
The truth
not.
is probably not.
Probably not. But if he turned around and said, next time you're in, tell the staff that you're here, and I'll have a pint waiting for you, and I'll just welcome you in, that would have gone down quite well. And you thought, you know what, why not? Let's do it.
You're so right.
So it's not about giving stuff away, but it's about gauging the customer and making sure they're not making false complaints, maybe like Marcus did. But don't give stuff away just because people ask for it. But a drink is nothing, is it, at the end of the day?
So a bit about menus, shorter off peaks.
Yeah, looking at menus, I mean, this is just from my personal opinion, to be quite honest with you, but looking at menus, and you look at them, and they're about 3 feet long, and they have absolutely every single dish for every part of the world. Again, it just goes back to your identity and who you are, what you sell, and who to. Menus, for me, don't need to be anything more than 8 dishes long, quite frankly, unless they're configurable, such such as, things like a burger where I can choose 8 different sides and 4 different sauces.
Yep.
Just keep it short, keep it sweet, particularly off-peak. If you are struggling with trade, like most people are at lunch and Monday, Tuesday nights, why not run a reduced menu? Why isn't that menu something that can run for 2-3 days in terms of when it's going to go off and how you're going to cook that food? Just to keep it simple, and if you're keeping it simple and the customer knows you're keeping it simple for that reason, then you cannot be afraid of giving an offer for that menu, because it is slightly different away from your on-peak Friday, Saturday night kind of a la carte menus.
Good point.
So it's just keeping that waste down. It's keeping the options simple, and just keeping the quality there, because chefs that will stand in a kitchen, in a quiet kitchen, will let their game down. But if you're just keep cooking 6 or 8 different dishes, just make sure you're keeping those 6 or 8 dishes bloody well.
Right, really good point there. So sort of 8 starters, 8 desserts, 8 mains, something like that. Ideally, keep it simple,
keep it short, keep it manageable, and if you can have interchangeable ingredients there, that's again going to impact on reducing waste and cost, then so be it.
Great words of advice. And just sort of finishing
one
off.
thing that kills me is availability of a restaurant. I mean, how many times do I want to phone a restaurant before, do you know what, I can't get hold of them, I'm going to go somewhere else? There is absolutely no excuse for not having a call divert from a landline to your mobile, off-peak, outside of hours, whenever. It is literally as simple as picking up your phone, dialing in 4 digits, and then saying, yeah, this is my call divert number after 30 seconds. I have lots of experience, particularly through Go Dine, where they're placing bookings on people's behalves, of not being available at 5 o'clock on a Saturday for bookings that night. There is absolutely no excuse. Call to action's got to be clear, and what is the process of people contacting you, and if that person isn't available, who is going to speak to them? You 100% need to be available 24 hours a day almost. Even employ virtual assistants, which can be very, very cheap to do nowadays. But that call handling and that divert from landline to mobile has to be there.
Yeah.
Otherwise people will just not phone.
Yes, you're going to lose business, and also it doesn't smack of any sort of professionalism and credibility, does it?
It's the availability in terms of the phone, but also what are your available opening hours?
Yeah.
And don't chop and change opening hours. People will stop coming if you suddenly change and close every other Tuesday lunch. You either open or you don't. It's as simple as that. But just be available. You could miss a phone call that could be worth to your business £200 to £1,000 for group booking, and you would hate it if you knew you'd lost that business because you couldn't be bothered to divert your landline through to your mobile when you left the business.
How very true. Some fantastic stuff there, Mark. Some really, really useful tips and tricks and stuff like that. Just a bit of a wrap up then, sort of summary, just as we get into...
Yeah, it's just really, for me, when I formed the business and my brother forms a business, think of it as an elevator pitch, as in a sense, in terms of who you are, what you do. If you cannot communicate in a very effective manner, in a short sentence, who you are, who you sell to, then you're not in the right business. You need to understand what is your core objective, and within a sentence be able to communicate that to other people. So if you are a traditional pizza restaurant using stone-baked ovens, just make sure that that is very, very easily communicated to people that ask you, that you're able to, on social media, tell people that instantly. Who you sell to, who your market are. If you haven't done any market research, you've got to understand your footfall, you've got to understand who your customers are. In one sentence, again, you need to be to understand who you sell to. And how do people know about us? What is your strategy? Are you going to build it on reputation? Is it going to be something where you're going to have a massive capital outlay in terms of marketing? But that, again, needs to be critical and needs to be something that you even, before you've even cooked your first dish, is understand who you sell to and who your market is, and that has to be done very, very quickly. And then also, ultimately, again, we talk about return on investment, but I'm amazed. I've spoken to restaurateurs that have no idea how many people they need just to keep their operation going.
Yeah, true, that is.
Just their their main core operation. I'm not talking about stripping back or things like that, but how many customers do I need to cover my rent, to cover my electricity bill, my tax, and my core staff. And for me, if you don't know any of those four things and you can't communicate those in a very, very short space of time, then one should question one's ability of running a business.
Brilliant. And if that's kind of where you're at, my suggestion would be that you need a bit of help from somebody, either a coach or a mentor or somebody else. Indeed. Fantastic stuff this afternoon. Just a couple of minutes about you, Easy Pre-Orders. Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to labour the point, obviously, but yeah, obviously we the pre-orders, we realised last year that they don't just sit within restaurants, they sit within airlines, within train companies, within schools even. So we've got pilots with schools so parents can choose their child's food, make healthy options for their child over a 2 to 3 week period. We've got some fantastic things going on where you can pre-order duty-free and food via our system after you've bought a plane ticket, and also with trains. But for us, it's a case of giving value and adding value to customers. So where we can, we will help basically make people more money, and if we don't, then we give you your money back. It really is that simple. But we believe what we've got is unique, and nobody else is doing what we're doing, and quite rightly, because you'd have to be mental to enter our game, to be honest with you. But it's enjoyable, and it'd be great to answer any questions you have via email, via call. Our telephone number is 0800 01 46 376, which is GO 0800 01 GO EPO. Or drop me an email on mark@easypreorders.com if you've got any questions or thoughts or ideas. It'd be good to hear from you.
That's lovely, and all the details will be on here under the video, so you can actually contact Mark about any of those things. I think just to sort of finish it off, you sort of said, going back to what you talked about earlier, average restaurant savings probably going to be between £6,000 and £8,000 a year, isn't it?
Yeah, savings-wise, but for me it's also, I mean, hugely people are driven by increases in revenue.
Sure.
And we open up new markets in terms of lunch in pre-theatre trade. We've reduced no-shows to 0 because we allow the online payments of all guests to make their own deposits and payments.
Which is great.
Opens up new markets, and we can turn tables quicker at Christmas, all by giving better customer experience. So it's what it's all about. It makes sense. I mean, if you think operations, how much time they spend on spreadsheets and lever arch files, and why on earth there isn't technology for this historically, it's just a no-brainer, quite honestly.
Brilliant, Mark. Well, I just want to thank you very, very much for today, for sharing a lot of valuable information with me and everybody else. You're very, very welcome. Thanks for being here. So if you only took a few things away from this sort of last 55 minutes or an hour, think about what Mark shared with you today about return on investment. Can you measure it? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. It's probably wasting a whole load of money. Think about who your customers are and how many customers you're actually going to need every week or every month in order to break even. You need to know those numbers. So some valuable stuff. Once again, thank you so, so much for that. All Mark's details will be on here for you to contact him, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.